So this past week, we have been reading Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson. Several shows ago, I did a show on the intro in the first chapter, so we're going to be getting into the second chapter. Just as a kind of summary of some of the things I covered in the introduction in chapter 1 is Peterson's idea of the two ways of viewing the world, either a place of things or as a forum for action. And that you can look at the world as either of these things, but when you're looking at one to the exclusion of the other, you're missing a picture of reality. So looking at the world as a place of things is kind of associated with the scientific outlook on life, the objective reality, the things that we can study, whereas the mythological or the religious framework looks at the world as a place for action, for actually doing things. And in order to do things, you require values, things that are pulling you towards something or pushing you away from something else. The options available in a mode of action mean that you have different values that you're prioritizing in different ways. So in chapter 2, this is where it pretty much makes up a big chunk of the book. The chapter itself is like almost 200 pages, so we'll only be covering the first part of that in this show. He looks at this forum for action and the evidence for it and how it actually plays out in everyday life and on multiple levels of reality almost. So he starts out by looking at just ordinary life, just an ordinary description of the kind of interactions and situations you might encounter in life, and then getting a bit deeper and looking at the neuropsychology, and then getting into the mythology, which is the biggest chunk of the chapter. So we're going to save the mythology for a later show and just look at the first bits. So what he's showing here is actually, this is where he shows the diagrams of what is the kind of generic map of meaning. Because as in the first chapter, one of the main points that he makes is that the world cannot be seen exclusively as a place of things, because things don't do anything. They don't change, they don't morph, they don't transform, they are just static. Things are static. The world is a form for action. The thing that makes it so is meaning. When we are perceiving objects or engaging in any kind of meaningful behavior, it is because we are perceiving meaning in it. We are responding to meaning and kind of injecting meaning. So when I mentioned perception, when we're actually seeing something, we're not just seeing objects. This is a point that Peterson's made, in several of his talks in the last few years, that we're not just seeing objects. We're actually seeing, it could be tools, but we're seeing the things in what they mean for us in a certain context. So if we see a door handle, it's for turning. If that had no meaning for us, it would just be this kind of indistinguishable blob of matter. It wouldn't be a thing. The things that we see are things because of the meaning that they have for us, which is socially mediated. So that's kind of a background for the overall map of meaning, and the overall map is basically the present that we are living in. This is our current situation, determined and conditioned by everything that has come before and everything influencing us in any given moment. And then that kind of that space of transformation in the middle, which is between the present and the possible future. And he calls these things, these places, the unbearable present and the ideal future. And it's the unbearable present because the thing about life, the thing about consciousness, just the thing about being itself, is that it's always moving, it's always changing, it's always either growing or evolving or devolving in some way. It's always changing. And he basically argues and makes a good case on like a fundamental level that not only the nature of mind and human behavior and action, but like the almost the world itself seems to be structured in such a way that there is a direction to life, to being, to just everything there is. That we are constantly in our everyday lives, just to bring it back down to the human level, we're constantly moving towards something. We don't just stay the same and statically, mechanically, automatically repeat the same behaviors like a clockwork toy machine. We are constantly engaging in goal-directed behavior of some sort. Whether those goals are consciously acknowledged or not, it could be as simple as like the instinctive goal that we have no control over or very little control over for hunger or something like that. So we get hungry, our body needs food, we feel hungry, and then our actions are directed, and we control our actions to some degree to get food, to stop being hungry, to fulfill that goal that has been influenced by our biology. And no matter what we do in life, there's always some goal in mind, because we wouldn't do anything if there wasn't any goal. So just right off the bat, we see in that picture of the world that it is imbued with meaning and value, because our goals necessarily, because they're goals, must have some meaning and value for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't perceive them, or we wouldn't pursue them. And we see that the world is, that we can't not see the world as a form for action. We can't just see it as a place of things, because in a place of things, there's no room for goals, because goals aren't things in the way that science and scientists think about things. Things are the objects that we study. They're the material things that we study. But Peterson's outlook is very, even though I don't think he, at least so far, he doesn't really argue against materialism, his overall viewpoint is very non-materialistic, because the essential parts of the map of meaning have nothing to do with matter. They have to do with values and meanings. The meaning that we find in the objects that we see and the goals that we have, and these ideal futures, these potential futures that we direct our actions towards. And probably the coolest thing about that I found was that just the idea that we are constantly engaging in this, whether we're aware of it or not, we're constantly comparing our present state to potential futures. And before listening to some Peterson lectures and before reading this book, I'd never really thought about it in terms of that this is a process that's going on constantly. Mm-hmm. It's part of the very basic nature of consciousness, humanity, whatever we are and are doing, it's there, and it's inescapable. It's inescapable that we are constantly in myriad different ways shaping our behavior, and shaping our behavior in terms of a pursuit of multiple goals that are often in conflict with each other. Maybe we'll get into some details on how that all plays out in his discussion. What did you guys think? Did you have any initial thoughts on?
Yeah, well, just in the preparation for this show, I was able to observe something similar to what you're discussing happen, that came up as kind of a hurdle to just the reading of the book. And I was, reading through that, the beginnings of the chapter and getting through it. And it's a very dense book. It's full of, neurophysiological, slogans and words. And so it's, you have to make an effort to really, slow down and understand what he's talking about. But as you make it through the chapter, it kind of unfolds itself, and a lot of things become somewhat, self-explanatory. But as I was, reading this book, I got a notification about a bill that I had just completely forgot about. It was, this credit card that I hadn't I hadn't used, and I never used, and it was just one of those annual things. And so then in my mind, I was like, oh shoot, so and I have to pay this thing, and I realized that. All of a sudden, the study for the show became completely irrelevant in my mind because of this new piece of information. This new meaningful piece of information became that much more relevant, and so I was, all of my attention was shifted towards, okay, so now I have to pay this bill, and I have to remember what the dang password was. I have to remember what my sign-in was. I can't even remember what the actual website. And then I was just watching watching as the whole process was going on, and I thought it was really interesting because I just read about the limbic system and its role in kind of mapping out what is the ideal kind of world, what it should look like, and what it should feel like, and what it shouldn't feel like, and how it directs a lot of attention and emotional resources towards things that are relevant. And it was interesting to me because then I just put it aside and then just kept reading, because I was like, well, another different part of me was more interested in what Jordan Peterson had to say. So I was like, well, that's just all silly, whatever. That's not actually that important to me right now. I'll take care of it when I take care of it. But it was interesting to observe that process take place, and then to use his framework in looking at other aspects of daily life too, and just how our machines are just orient themselves, how our body orients towards incoming information, towards things that are in our environment, and just automatically, charts its own course, with or without conscious deliberation.
Yeah, I didn't mention it, but probably the most important aspect of this map of the world, this map of meaning, is this idea of novelty. That's the unexpected. It's what he calls unexplored territory at various times. It is the new thing, the thing you're unfamiliar with, the thing you're not expecting that comes into play in your life. So that was this bill coming out of nowhere that you hadn't thought about, and how that process of the transition, like the eternal, never-ending transition from the present to the ideal future, is an encounter with novelty. That all learning that we go through, that we experience, is an encounter with novelty. It is creating the known world, the world of your experience that you're familiar with, out of things that are new and unfamiliar. And like he points out at one point, everything that is known currently was previously unknown and novel. So everything that gives us comfort and regularity and familiarity with the world is comes out of the prior transformation of novelty into that exploration of the unknown, then becomes kind of consolidated in your routine and your habits and your worldview. And this applies individually and culturally throughout all history, and creates that body of culture and of not just habit and familiarity. And the encounter with the unknown is where we learn new things. And the encounter with the unknown is the primary element in that transformation. Because you can't learn anything just based on... You can't learn anything new, obviously, if you don't encounter anything new. If you just limit yourself to what you already know and already experience, then that is kind of indistinguishable from being an automaton and just a mechanical being. But there's something intrinsic about life itself, that there is this encounter with novelty that can either be a good thing or a bad thing, and even that will depend on what your aims are, because this whole process is dependent on what the goals and the aims are. Like in your example, you have this immediate goal of just reading this book and learning these things, and then this unknown kind of chaotic element introduces itself, and all of a sudden your aims and your goals shift. You're not thinking about the book anymore. You're thinking about this bill, right? Your internal processes have been completely derailed and set off track into this new direction. And it took a little bit of effort for you, conscious effort for you to kind of redirect back onto the track that you were on previously. But it was this automatic process. And this gets into the neuropsychological stuff that he talks about, that this is fundamental on the biological level too. It's the orienting reflex. It's like our bodies are such that when we encounter something new, our attention automatically gets diverted to them. And this just makes sense. It makes sense on all levels, because if something is new and uncertain, you're not sure the nature of that thing. It could be good or it could be bad. If it's bad, you might die. So it pays to direct your attention towards it. so the first kind of response to something new is to orient towards it and kind of stop what you're doing and attend to it, to see what it is. And then after that, depending on the nature of it, that engages curiosity. So then you might be, okay, well, what is this new thing? Let's explore further, or, let's get the hell out of here, because it might be something extremely dangerous. But even those things, all of those things are context dependent. They depend on certain goals. So he gives several kind of real life examples in the book that he goes through like extensively. He gives the examples. Most of them are like in an office setting. So he or just the type of character that he's invoking here are in the office, have a certain goal in mind. Maybe it's getting down a certain level of stories of the building outside to get to a meeting in another building. And so imagine yourself in that situation. You have your habitual route planned out in your mind. Okay, well, I'm going to leave my office at this time because it's going to take about 15 minutes to get there. So I'm gonna leave then, and then I'm gonna take the elevator down, and I'll be there with plenty of time, or just in time. But you get to the elevator and push the button, and you're waiting, and it doesn't arrive. And you're still waiting, and the more you wait, we've all had this experience, right, where we're waiting for something, probably an elevator, and the more you wait, the more time you're wasting, but the more you don't want to kind of take the stairs because you've been there for so long, and it's going to come eventually, right? So you waste another couple minutes waiting for the elevator until finally you realize, okay, well, the elevator's not coming, obviously, and so you take the stairs, and then you get down. You're already like 10 minutes late because you've been waiting for this elevator, or you've got 5 minutes now when you get to the bottom of the stairs, as opposed to having 10 to 15 minutes if you would have taken the elevator. So you're strapped for time, and you get onto the street, and you're kind of running down the street. Now everyone on that street is now an obstacle, whereas previously they might have just been neutral objects. They might have even been objects of interest, or maybe even more than that, but now they're getting in your way. Like old ladies, it's like you'll have the influence to just knock them out of the way. Kids, I don't like kids. And you hit a red light, no walk sign, and now that red light is like your nemesis, and you are you are motivated to jaywalk or whatever, and all of those things, all of your reactions to the things in your path change fundamentally from if you were to just have taken the elevator. Your goal has changed the flavor, the emotional flavor of the things in your experience. And this just has so many different implications for pretty much everything, because it is our goals, it is the values that we have that are intrinsically tied with our goals that determine the way we see not only the things in our life, the experiences, but the other people in our life. So if we have a goal in mind that necessitates, for example, he gives the examples of all these totalitarian systems of government. Like he uses examples from the Holocaust a lot, and the Gulag. If you have a goal in mind that necessitates the treatment of other individuals, other humans, as cattle or less than human, then you can see how that would happen. You can see how that is possible because what they value, the goals that they have in mind necessitate that. Just like in that example of the person running to the street, there is a situation where there are situations in which a person who is considered a good person and considers himself a good person can find old people and little children to be nuisances just to be batted out of the way. Whether or not he'll act on that in any kind of violent way is another question, but the perception, the feeling, the valence, the emotion in his mind changes the actual way that he perceives those people.
Well, so actually you just brought up a very important point to the whole reason that Peterson came up with the book. And that was, as he's explained in many other videos, that one of the reasons for his life's work is to understand the very nature of evil and how it was that certain political regimes could justify to themselves, could rationalize the wholesale malevolence that they inflicted on other people. And so what this book seems to be an outgrowth of is this kind of wanting to get down to the nitty-gritty of how it is we operate, how it is we cognitively deal with the day-to-day in situations such that we can take a step back far enough to be able to exercise some amount of distance and control over ourselves, so that we can navigate life in a constructive way. And one of the ways that we do this, and Corey kind of started us off right off the bat, and you followed suit, Harrison, is to tell stories and narratives about what it is we're doing, and based on the values that we have, based on the goal-oriented achievements we'd like to make for ourselves, based on the desire to get out of this, what does he call it? The
unbearable present.
The unbearable present. The moments that you have in the present that say, this isn't the life that I'd like to have, and I don't have, what I want yet, and it might look like that. It might look a little different. But that's kind of another bigger picture or perspective of maps of meaning is to, the whole purpose of this and in kind of looking at how it is we come to respond to stimuli, how we assess stimuli, negative or positive, and the choices that we make in the medium, the long term, and even the short term. All of these things go a great deal towards being manifestations of the values that we have or that we say that we have. So having this kind of perspective, at least in theory, I'd still like to get my head around a lot of this and assimilate it better for myself. In theory, it is going to put us in a better position to not react to certain things that might come as a surprise in our lives and in our environment. Things that hopefully we can anticipate, at least to some degree. But I do want to get back to your explanation, Harrison, of this novelty, this kind of surprising element that comes into one's life. And I think we have a diagram of that. It's called the ambivalent nature of novelty. Because this is really just a kind of, first tier of unexpectedness, of little things that come in the way, like a bill and an email, like Corey suggested, or 24 ladybugs that are in your studio that are flying around. You could say, well, they're not really hurting anything. They're a bit of a nuisance. They become they're less of a problem than we can make them out to be.
Than bears.
Yes, and and there are also little things that might be positive signs in our reality, little kind of boons or boosts that also take the form of anomalies or novelty in our life that we can respond to, and like the possibility of an extra shift at work, or or a birthday that's coming up, an opportunity to celebrate something. So that's the very first tier, and he puts this into a context of another slide that he creates called the normal novelty in the course of goal-directed behavior. And that one kind of gets a little more complex, because in the normal course of things, you still have an aim, but those aims can be kind of presented with obstacles and are places from which to decide how you're going to respond. And so I think I'm going to leave it at that. We have 2 more slides that we're going to get into.
Well, yeah, just going back to the example that I gave. So I had an aim, and which was to, be prepared for the show, clearly. And then this little element of the unknown came in, right? And it was this bill. But then, let's say that you add this other element. So I'm going in and I can't find I can't find my password or whatever. And so I go and I'm looking further and I'm investigating. And now I see that somebody's been using this credit card and they've been racking up huge amounts of debt, right? Now that's a whole new element where now I'm in a completely different reality that, as he points out, scientifically speaking, whatever, I'm still the same person. I'm still, in the same house. I'm made of the same matter, same, physiological systems and everything. But in terms of, maps of meaning, my internal map is now completely needs to be updated. And now I need to take a drastic course of action where, researching for the show is completely irrelevant, and it would make sense for it to be completely irrelevant at that time. So now I'm in a completely different territory, and now the valence of threat is extremely high. And so he talks about negatively valenced things as being threats and punishments, and threats are like the promise of punishment. So now I know that financially I could be who knows how bad it could get. So let's say it was a debit card, my bank account was wiped out, or something along those lines. In the blink of an eye, you can be drug into a realm of chaos, from which now you have to update all of these new all of your maps in order to figure out how to get from that unbearable present back to a place of stability, back to the realm of order, quote unquote. And what was navigated? Was that the word that he uses? It's the realm that you have, essentially your established realm is basically.
Well, actually, that's a pretty good place to put in the 3rd slide, I think. The emergence of revolutionary novelty in the course of goal-directed behavior. And because it's no longer this kind of, mundane, banal novelty that doesn't threaten to upend your life and your plans. It's something he calls revolutionary novelty. And, in his own life, Peterson's experience of his wife's sickness in recent months was a revolutionary novelty. He had to, in the midst of, book tours and television programs and signings, he had to stop everything and tend to the care of his wife. And there was an element of chaos involved that was destabilizing to some extent. And who hasn't had some kind of upheaval in their lives that they didn't anticipate, that they couldn't think ahead for or prepare for? It was revolutionary. It was something that required some hard thinking, as he would put it, and also a kind of remapping of all the values and all the goal-oriented behavior that up until then ruled the show. So it is out of that chaos, out of that revolutionary novelty, that we have an opportunity. And I hope we'll be getting into this in a future show with Nassim Taleb's Anti-Fragile book, which gets into that quite a bit. But for now, I mean, it's really interesting because I'm reading about this section of this area of development, of life, of experience, and thinking quite a lot of positive disintegration and Dabrowski.
Yeah.
And how having this bankruptcy of sorts, this being laid low, this experience of being knocked down, can cause you to further disintegrate, in which case it would be a negative disintegration, or it can be the basis from which to build oneself back up again.
Yeah, to reintegrate.
Yes.
Yeah, well, on the subject of the kind of mundane, ordinary bits of chaos that come into your life and the revolutionary ones, in his kind of summary section at the beginning of the chapter, I just want to read a couple things that get into that. So he says, we tell ourselves stories about who we are, where we would like to be, and how we are going to get there. These stories regulate our emotions by determining the significance of all the things we encounter and all the events we experience. We regard things that get us on our way as positive, things that impede our progress as negative, and things that do neither as irrelevant. Most things are irrelevant, and that is a good thing, as we have limited attentional resources. So that's what that really struck me when he says these stories regulate our emotions. It is stories that actually regulate our emotions, because by placing ourselves in that story, that's where things make sense. That's where there's meaning. If we didn't have stories, if we didn't have that dynamic that narrative storyline that we can place ourselves in, and if we didn't have the realm of the known out of which we're operating in the present, then we would be encountering novelty at everything that we looked at, and that would be very stressful. It's just like if you imagine if your consciousness, if your awareness wasn't just limited to yourself, but you had the awareness, kind of like in X-Men of Professor X, of all the humans on the planet at this present moment, it would be so completely overwhelming that you'd probably, your mind would explode, because there would be so much. Just think about that, what that would entail. 7 billion people. Think about all the suffering that's going on at this moment, all the little and huge suffering that is going on, and all the joys and all the positive things, and all of the just regular mundane things. It would be information overload, but not just information overload, but emotion overload. That is a lot to take in. That's what it would be. That's something what it would be like to not have that known territory from which to operate, and to not place yourself into a story. It would just be to be bombarded by all the chaos of everyone's life at one moment, because everything in your life would be chaos. It would just disintegrate you completely. At least that's the way I imagine it. So it's actually the stories that we place ourselves in that regulate those emotions, that bring them to manageable levels, so that everything isn't chaotic, everything isn't novel, we're not constantly caught off guard by every new thing. We have familiarity, we have things that can just let us get by in order to do the few goals that we have relative to the infinite just ebb and sway of the ocean of chaos in which we're surrounded. It's not all chaos, because we can form some bit of order out of it in which to operate. And we need that little bit of stability in which to operate. Now, the problem, of course, comes because we don't have all information, we don't know everything, we don't have complete knowledge about everything that's going on and everything that will happen, so we can't predict accurately. We can't tailor our goals so that they'll work flawlessly every time.
Right.
We have to navigate this world that is a combination and an interplay of the known and the unknown. So that gets to the second quote here. Inconveniences interfere with our plans. We do not like inconveniences and will avoid dealing with them. Nonetheless, they occur commonly, so commonly, in fact, that they might be regarded as an integral, predictable, and constant feature of the human environment. We have adapted to this feature, have the intrinsic resources to cope with inconveniences. We benefit, become stronger in doing so. So there's that bit of anti-fragility in there. And then he goes on, ignored inconveniences accumulate rather than disappear. When they accumulate in sufficient numbers, they produce a catastrophe. A self-induced catastrophe, to be sure, but one that may be indistinguishable from an act of God. So this seems to be something, again, it's like the structure and the fabric of the universe is composed in this way, that we have goals and we're doing certain things, but the forum for action is set up in such a way that certain things we do won't get us to our goals, that we can make mistakes. And so these are the minor inconveniences that come about that tell us that there's something wrong with our map, there's something wrong with our plan, something we haven't considered yet. Mm-hmm. And so, like he says, those inconveniences, if we don't attend to them and deal with them and revise our maps,
Right.
then they accumulate to the point where they will hit us with a disaster. So as opposed to just, maybe getting a few pebbles thrown our way on our walk, we get a boulder that falls on us and crushes us completely, because they've accumulated so much mass that they will destroy us. So that the method of life is to navigate this situation where we have to kind of constantly adapt our goals, refine our goals, and refine our plans in order to be able to make them work, because we will run up against obstacles because we don't know the best way. No one does. Like no one can have a goal in mind and then just effortlessly and expertly navigate the path to get there with no hiccups whatsoever. It's just not the way reality works. Mm-hmm. There is a huge amount of uncertainty in the world, things that we can't control, things that we don't know, probably things that we can't know given our current condition and our current situation. So that is the situation we find ourselves. Now, coming back to the difference between normal and revolutionary life, in normal life we have a plan, we have a goal, and minor inconveniences get in our way. But once we deal with those minor inconveniences, we can resume our plan and get to our goal, our original goal. It's like walking from A to B and there's a boulder in the middle. Well, that causes us to just slightly divert our path. Technically, it's a new map, but it's pretty much the same. We're still going in the same direction. We're still getting to the same goal. We've gone from A to B, but just with a minor revision of our plan. But sometimes our goals are such that they are unreachable, that the obstacle we encounter causes us to totally reshape our map. Mm-hmm. And so this would be the case of, we're not going to B anymore. We're going to C. And this could be like a career, like a total career change, some fundamental, like big change in your life. And this is where we can bring in positive disintegration and also some kind of like esoteric kind of self-development stuff like Gurdjieff, where there's like a radical reappraisal of one's life. And it could be as simple as a career change, like changing the direction of your life. But on a more fundamental level, it could be the total reorientation of your entire value structure, mm-hmm. the entire way you're thinking about your life and going about your life, to the point where, from that perspective, your career might be irrelevant. That it's something on such a deeper level. So in positive disintegration, this would be like you're living your life with certain goals in mind, and then you realize that all of the actions in your life, that none of them are leading you towards the ideal for yourself that you actually have in mind to some vague degree, and some of them are probably going against that goal and hindering your progress towards it, and that can inspire and provoke a disintegration of the kind of internal mental structure that you have currently, to the point where you now devalue the things you used to value something completely different that's on a different kind of moral level than your previous structure was. So the things that were important to you beforehand become relatively unimportant in relation to this new thing, which is of supreme importance. And you can see this in examples of kind of maybe like, religious transformation and conversion experiences, that type of thing. That's one example of something of this sort going on, where you just completely change your life, and this would be something like noticeable to other people, where it's like, wow, you're a completely different person now. I don't even recognize you because you're different on such a fundamental level. So this model applies applies on so many different levels, and
Yes.
because it's so universal, it applies from the most mundane thing, from getting up in the morning and walking to the bathroom to take a shower, to the most fundamental things about life and the meaning of life possible. It's like they are all almost like it's like a giant fractal where you can zoom in and zoom out, and the pattern is the same no matter what level of analysis you're on. That's why I think that, like I said, it's almost, there's this anti-materialism kind of philosophy embedded in these ideas, to the point where I'd suspect you could apply this to. He even hints at it at certain points, but never actually goes that far. He says, "Well, I'm not going that far, but you could probably zoom this into like the quantum level, and then zoom out to the level of the totality of the universe of this." That seems to be. It seems that there is something absolutely fundamental about this basic process of the known, transforming through meaning and value into the ideal and possible potential B, and that is just the way the universe works, from the most basic material bits that we can conceive of to whatever is greater than ourselves that we also can't conceive of.
Well, when you were saying all that, I was specifically thinking of reading Sot and reading news about our world, about the various things that are profoundly shaping the landscape of the way that people are thinking and responding to social movements, to environmental changes, all sorts of things. And I was thinking of, there are any number of environmental changes, in particular, things coming into our atmosphere that is that the science has presented that has affected my way of thinking about how I eat. There are signs that the economy is going in a certain direction, and that one would do well to think forward about the economy. All of these things have been assimilated to some degree, let's say. Like you said, there are so many unknowns and unknown unknowns and unpredictable anomalies. You can't account for everything. But taking this at as far on the macroscopic level as you can, and trying to anticipate at least what you can anticipate in terms of those chaotic elements that might be introduced into your life and into the lives of many other people, would just seem to be a very wise thing to do, because then what happens is you have the opportunity to mitigate all of those potentially negative developments on your life, on those goals that you may have. You can plan ahead to the extent that it's possible. So that, to me, is the value of keeping abreast of so many of the events that are unfolding that make my head spin, and that are part of my going on in the background as I interact with the world, as I try to accomplish the goals that I have, and that's kind of an important thing, because the introduction of chaos into reality on planet Earth at this time has so much potential for destruction and for upending people's lives, simply because they're not taking certain things into account, and that would apply to me, on those matters that I'm unaware of as well. So, that seems to be a big part of why this perspective, I think, is so useful.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to read a quote from this second chapter. Peterson writes, "Creative exploration of the unknown and consequent generation of knowledge is construction or update of patterns of behavior and representation, such that the unknown is transformed from something terrifying and compelling into something beneficial, or at least something irrelevant. The presence of capacity for such creative exploration and knowledge generation may be regarded as the third and final permanent constituent element of human experience, in addition to the domain of the known and unknown." Now, there's some question there about what it means to have, creative exploration of the unknown. And I think that, really that kind of comes down to anything that's constructive, anything that extends the organization, your own organization, into areas that previously you just weren't aware of. It's not, just rushing headlong into the chaos and whatever, and then coming back, bruised and battered, but it's really about bringing back something beneficial, or at least making some things irrelevant. And I think that's also a part of why order over time can become, sort of tyrannical or banal, is that, a lot of things just become irrelevant as order extends, and, you kind of imitate people's ideas or emotional states or attitudes towards different things. You end up with the society can get to a point where it's like, well, we know everything, so who cares? Science, it's just a few days away, and pretty soon we'll know everything there is to know in the universe. And you get that kind of egoism, I think, that is, part and parcel of being, in a civilized or an Ivy League graduate, or, something along those lines, where you have benefited so much from the knowledge generated and the irrelevancy generated from past generations that, you lose track of how that kind of chaos could turn you into a little worm. He devotes a section of the book to what it means to be civilized, and he discusses the fact that for a lot of civilized people, really what they do is they have the unknown and that chaos significantly at bay due to whatever technological, sociological factors, servants, help, economic help, financial help. All of these things can keep the chaos at bay, that you lose track of how giant and how permanent a feature the unknown, the chaotic, the irrational and terrifying really is in the daily lives of everybody else.
Well, he also says what is known and what unknown is always relative in a matter of speaking, because what is unexpected depends entirely upon what we expect, desire, on what we had previously planned and presumed. The unexpected constantly occurs because it is impossible, in the absence of omniscience, to formulate an entirely accurate model of what actually is happening, or of what should happen, because it is impossible to determine what results ongoing behavior will finally produce. Errors in representation of the unbearable present and the ideal, desired future are inevitable in consequence, as are errors of implementation and representation of the means by which the former can be transformed into the latter. The infinite human capacity for error means that encounter with the unknown is inevitable. In the course of human experience, means that the likelihood of such encounter is as certain, regardless of place and time of individual existence, as death and taxation. The variable existence of the unknown, paradoxically enough, can therefore be regarded as an environmental constant. Adaptation to the existence of this domain must occur, therefore, in every culture and in every historical period, regardless of the particulars of any given social or biological circumstance. So here he's saying that adaptation to the unknown, having that capacity for adapting to the situation, to the chaos, to the novelty that is so unpredictable and unpreparable for is a kind of a crucial element to survival, and hopefully something beyond survival. Hopefully, reaching a place within one's own being that affords the capacity to resume the goals that one has had, or to reevaluate them, at least in such a way that would be constructive and forwarding.
Well, I want to get back to something I said at the top of the show about us being kind of constantly involved in this process of comparing to the future and encountering this novelty. So going off that quote that you just read, partway through the chapter, I want to read this paragraph. He writes, "You also have a model of the present, constantly operative. You understand your somewhat subordinate position within a corporation, which is your importance relative to the others above and below you in the hierarchy. You understand the significance of those experiences that occur regularly while you are doing your job. You know who you can give orders to, who you have to listen to, who is doing a good job, who can be safely ignored, and so on. You are always comparing this present unsatisfactory condition to that of your ideal, which is you increasingly respected, powerful, rich, and happy, free of anxiety and suffering, climbing towards your ultimate success. You are unceasingly involved in attempts to transform the present as you currently understand it into the future as you hope it will be. Your actions are designed to produce your ideal, designed to transform the present into something ever more closely resembling what you want. You are confident in your model of reality in your story. When you put it into action, you get results." Now, I just want to get a bit deeper into this idea of being, of unceasingly comparing, because like I mentioned, I think this is a process that goes on automatically. It doesn't have to be conscious. You can be aware of your position in the hierarchy, but you can also not be aware that you're aware of it. Like we have this, we might have this awareness that, okay, well, that person's below me in the social hierarchy. I can push them around, but I have to really brown nose or be teacher's pet towards whoever in the company or a teacher or a professor, whatever. You've got this kind of automatic awareness of the social hierarchy, and Peterson talks about this in 12 Rules for Life 2 in the Lobster chapter. Just that this is this process that goes on in all, in the vast majority of life forms, potentially all of them, this awareness of social hierarchy. But you don't actually have to be consciously aware of it. You can have some people just kind of going through the motions that, without thinking about it, know these things. So they treat other people as dirt because they know they're below them, and they suck up to the boss because they know that'll get them good things. But they haven't actually identified consciously that these things are going on. If you're to ask them what about this, they wouldn't be able to necessarily verbalize this awareness of it. So, and I think this applies to so many different levels and facets, because we are such complex things. We're constantly engaged in so many goals that we're not aware of. And this could be, you can start the picture at the lowest level of just your biology. Like there's so many things going on in your biology that you're not consciously aware of. So I think Peterson gets into this, how you, like on the level of digestion or respiration or blood circulation, it's like these things are going on in your body without your awareness. And there are tons of goal-directed behaviors going on in your cells and all the systems of your body that you're not consciously aware of. You might get signals of them every once in a while in the form of hunger or the need to go to the bathroom or feeling too hot or too cold, but they haven't. The processes themselves haven't raised themselves to the level of consciousness. And at the same time, that's happening probably for a lot of people in their daily lives, in their jobs, in their relationships, that because, partially at least, because they haven't analyzed those things and really thought them and pondered on them, they are acting like effectively as automatons in their life without having examined these things. So you have this extremely vague goal of where you want to be in your relationship, for instance, or what your career goals are, or your goals in your job. So this would be just like the life of coasting through things, just expecting things to happen the way you want them to happen, even though you don't really have a great idea of what you want to happen in the first place. Mm-hmm. So this process of constantly comparing is still going on. Like you've got this vague idea of a better relationship, but because you're not even sure of what the goal is, you don't have a plan, you don't know what to change, what to do differently, what to keep doing. You just kind of keep going through the motions because in the vague hope that you might reach that goal, but you're not going to get there, or at the very least it's going to be very, very slow. Like you might not get there before you die, because you haven't identified, you haven't elaborated and articulated what the actual goal is. So this gets into why Peterson is always recommending his future authoring program, is to actually make the plan. Because when you actually make the plan verbal, when you actually put it into a form, then you can actually see it. You can see something that beforehand was just this vague, like miasmus, is that a word? Just diaphanous thing, this foggy notion of what the future might be. But when you actually fill in the detail and kind of zoom in on that to get a high definition picture of what that is, then you can get into your plans. You can start seeing what the actual things you could be doing differently are. What things that you're not doing that you have to be doing, or maybe that your goal, you don't even actually want that goal. You had this vague goal, let's say, of this future position in your job that you were striving towards in all these ways that you weren't even really consciously aware of. But now when you look at it, you realize you don't even like your job. You don't even want to be in this position. You don't want to be manager because you would rather be doing something else completely. That vague goal that you had in mind wasn't even applicable to the job that you were in right now. The vague feeling that you had was that you wanted like some kind of vocational fulfillment in a completely different area. He gives a couple examples of that too, of the guy that goes into the meeting with these high expectations of how he's going to perform and what he's going to say and how everyone's going to love him. And then afterwards he thinks he did a great job, and then he gets called into the boss's office, and she tells him, you're not cut out for this. Everyone hates you, essentially. You act like a total jerk in meetings. And the guy says, oh, what? Gets all angry. Oh, that lady, that boss is a bitch. And then he gets home, and after stewing for a month or two, realizes that he never liked the job in the first place, and he always wanted to do something else. Just that there's that kind of example. So there is a definite positive, I guess, and effective, what's the word? There's something positive and effective about articulating for yourself what your goals actually are, about determining what they are, and then being able to put a plan into action. And that, of course, gets into Stephen Covey's book that we talked about a couple weeks ago, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, we've discussed this in the past. I can't remember if it was Alfred North Whitehead or if it was Collingwood, but how they defined what it meant to be a rational being. And in order to be a rational being, you had to have a reason for the things that you do. And that was part of the meaning of the word rational. And, when you're living your life based on these, fuzzy, vague goals, it's fairly irrational. I mean, you could maybe have some kind of a reason, like, oh, I want to be rich. But I mean, have you really, did you, dig deep down? Why did you want to be rich? Well, to blah, 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 blah. What is the real core reason? What is the real mission in your life? And like you said, that does go back to, like all the different exercises and work behind, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is to develop someone who's rational in a way that is oriented towards others, serving others and making their lives better, and being an effective person in your own life as well. But before, and Peterson, throughout this chapter, he really lays it out really in a stunning way, so that by the time you're done with this portion of the chapter that we're talking about, you come away with the sense that, people are mostly, like maybe 99%, all of us 99%, like artificially intelligent. And all these systems, all these drives that we have are programmed, and they make decisions. They operate, they affect our consciousness, so that we're hungry or we're thirsty or we're angry or we're afraid, and all these different things. But until it seems to me, until you are able to say that you do have a reason, and you're testing the things that you're doing against a reason that is that subordinates all these other drives, then it's hard to say that you really do have yourself, like an individual consciousness, character, or personality, anything like that. And as you were pointing out, Harrison, this requires, in some way, it seems like it requires kind of an acceptance of the unknown and of the chaos, because when you accept that the reasons that you're doing things are not well thought out or silly or stupid, now you are left with this huge, vast array of potential of the unknown that is like it's both frightening in one sense, and like you pointed out, Ilan, there is something hopeful about it too. But primarily, it's frightening. You start questioning everything that you thought, everything you were taught. Your mind is going back through your history, the decisions that you made that got you to where you were at. Were they good decisions? Can you even remember the reasons why you made the decisions? The past is this vast sea of pure amorphous, craziness, for a lot of people. We say you read an autobiography and it seems like, and then I did this because of this, and then I did that, and that. But for just about everybody, the past is just like a holy crap, was that a train wreck? I'm glad I'm glad I made it through that, and I'm still able to tell the tale. But I think that's one of the benefits to reading Maps of Meaning, is because it gives you a diagram, kind of a template for knowing what it means to be human in that way. You get a sense. He really paints the picture that of all the different systems that are involved in all of the things that we think that make us unique, our effective subjective experiences that we think make us unique. We see he goes all the way down to rats and rodents, and you see like, wow, these rodents, when they see a cat come around, they just scream and scream and scream for up to like 7 or 8 hours, and then they go back to doing similar kinds of activities that we do as human beings. They have similar kinds of socializing and all that stuff, and they've got their their little rat parties, I'm sure, and all that kind of stuff. But the same effective art. I don't know if you want to say it's artificially intelligent, but that's just what I'm going to rest with for right now. Is that the same artificially intelligent kind of foundation for behavior and experience that we have, but we also have the potential through manipulating objects, with our speech, with our hands, with our minds, intellectually. We can probe, the intentions that we have, the intentions that others have, and we can seek to find goals that are better and completely different maps than the ones that we had previously. And it's when you start doing that, then you're venturing into a territory that is completely bizarre, because you don't have a map for it whatsoever. And maybe you get to a point where nobody has a map for it. And that's where I think you're talking about individuals who are truly pioneers, that they go into a territory where nobody has ever been before, and it could be psychologically, like Peterson, or other authors that we've spoke about, like Andrew Lobachevsky and his writings on the activities of psychopaths in positions of power, and how his take on how these major evil regimes take form. But individuals who are thrust into the unknown, into the chaos, but they still retain that creative, hopeful ability to bring back something, that of value, of supreme value in many cases for other people, and they do it with they have some spectacularly different map than just us average schlubs. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, what you said reminded me of a few things. One was the book that we did a show on some time ago called A Strange Order of Things, which lays out the groundwork for how we have these systems that were built upon that are designed, it would seem, to establish homeostasis, this homeostatic imperative, this balance within ourselves. That would be the kind of AI you're talking about. They're so automatic. They're so designed, that we're largely unconscious of them. But what differs from ourselves and, say, rats is at least biologically, is our prefrontal cortex that he discusses a little bit in this chapter, and at least our capacity and potential to conceptualize time and future goals, and to think in the abstract in such a way that we are capable of assessing our values, reassessing them, looking at them from different perspectives, and that's one of our gifts, again, at least in potential, where the more we become conscious of them, the more there is an active thinking that may not always be easy, but that we choose to engage in. The more we do this, the more kind of control, or at least ability to respond to the chaos we can give ourselves. And another thing, I'm glad you brought up Lobachevsky, Corey, because again, and I think I've said this on a previous show, Jordan Peterson is a panorologist. He is looking at the pathology of society and offering them an alternative, a way out, another way to respond to the pathological influences of movements that would instill in a person the motivation or the impetus to react instead of to assess and to respond. And that's really one of his great values. And the irony, of course, and we've said this before too, is that he's vilified and demonized and accused of being exactly the thing that he's trying to point out to people. And it's incredible to read critiques of this guy. People just don't want to get it. They don't want to take responsibility for their own choices and for the things that they are assuming to be true. They're making presumptions about how things work and who they are, left, right, and center. And his life's work is no. You want to consider these issues. You want to be thinking about your own story, your own map of values that's going to bring you forward in life with as few chaotic elements as possible, or at least the mechanisms, the strength, and the resources to respond to the chaos. Which reminds me of another thing that he had written in this chapter. He says that deviations from desired outcome constitute relatively novel events, indicative of errors in presumption, either at the level of analysis of current state, process, or ideal future. Such mismatches, unpredictable, non-redundant, or novel occurrences, constantly comprise the most intrinsically meaningful, interesting elements of the human experiential field. This interest and meaning signifies the presence of new information and constitutes a prepotent stimulus for human and animal action. It is where the unpredictable emerges that the possibility for all new and useful information exists. It is during the process of exploration of the unpredictable or unexpected that all knowledge and wisdom is generated, all boundaries of adapted competence extended, all foreign territory explored, mapped, and mastered. The eternally extant domain of the unknown therefore constitutes the matrix from which all conditional knowledge emerges. Everything presently known to each, everything rendered predictable, was at one time unknown to all and had to be rendered predictable, beneficial at best, irrelevant at worst, as a consequence of active exploration-driven adaptation. The matrix is of indeterminable breadth. Despite our great storehouse of culture, despite the wisdom bequeathed to us by our ancestors, we are still fundamentally ignorant and will remain so, no matter how much we learn. The domain of the unknown surrounds us like an ocean surrounds an island. We can increase the area of the island, but we never take away much from the sea. So when you mentioned the sea before and how we, how much there is to know, it reminded me of that quote, which is pretty wonderful, I think. But he seems to be saying two things at the same time. One is we're never going to, knowledge is infinite. There's a sea of information. By the same token, it's out of this kind of pioneering spirit, as you said, that we're gonna grow, that we're gonna find uses for knowledge and information in ways that can be of service to others and to ourselves.
Right, and that it's not like everybody's got to be a pioneer, but rather that this special class of people or whatever is a distinct class, and there's definitely a distinct attitude taken towards the unknown that Peterson's work kind of serves as a blueprint almost, for
A map?
no.
Of meaning?
Absolutely not. None of those things. But yeah, it's as like a map
Corey's being
for
disagreeable.
No, I'm not. Okay. Anyway, so I wanted to read this quote because I thought it was really interesting. It's a little bit off of what we've been discussing, but I was thinking about people and their self-knowledge, and it's easy, I think, for people to get caught up in the past. But I think a certain objective understanding of your past, your upbringing, is good. And I thought that this quote from Peterson really hit the nail on the head. He wrote, "Past experience, learning, does not merely condition, rather, such experience determines the precise nature of the framework of reference or context that will be brought to bear on the analysis of any given situation. This cognitive frame of reference acts as the intermediary between past learning, present experience, and future desire. This intermediary is a valid object of scientific exploration, a phenomenon as real as anything abstracted is real, and far more parsimonious and accessible as such a phenomenon than the simple, non-interpreted, and non-measurable, in any case, sum total of reinforcement history." All the things that have happened to you, whatever, all the times that you stubbed your toe. "Frameworks of reference, influenced in their structure by learning, specify the valence of ongoing experience, determine what might be regarded in a given time and place as good, bad, or indifferent. Furthermore, inferences about the nature of the framework of reference governing the behavior of others, that is, looking at the world through the eyes of another, may produce results that are more useful, more broadly generalizable, useful as insights into the personality of another and less demanding of cognitive resources than attempts to understand the details of a given person's reinforcement history. And so I was thinking that it's, and that what he's saying there, it seems like it's good to have basically a profile of who you would be if you weren't you. You know what I'm saying? Like you know this person, you know yourself, you know the experiences that you've had, and now you kind of just extrapolate that out. Now, okay, so if I knew somebody else who had these same experiences, what kind of a person would I think they would be? How do I think they would react towards these other things? You know, and then also same if you develop profiles of other people around you, as you get to know them and you understand, you know, by profile, I'm talking about that framework of reference, of valences, you know, about what this person considers good, what that person considers bad, and it goes hand in hand with what we were talking about on Stephen Covey's show in terms of being proactive and knowing what, you know, adds to the emotional bank account that you and another person share, and the trust bank account versus what actually detracts from it. Because I know, you know, one person, you know, making fun of them adds to the emotional bank account because I know that their reinforcement history. Another person, you make fun of them and it's like, oh my God, you know, this, now we're going to have a fight. Now it's a war. You know, it's, you know, something like that. I just thought it was an interesting quote from that, from this chapter of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since we're getting close to the end of the show, just wanted to show the last slide here that we have. It's called the regeneration of stability from the domain of chaos. And basically it kind of visualizes the kind of existence that the normal everyday existence, where the possibility for novelty exists. And then you have the introduction of chaos, which thank you, Harrison, which is a disintegration or a descent. But then it offers a kind of another way, which is as we were saying earlier, the reintegration or the ascent, where you can get back on track potentially. So, you know, with every fall, hopefully there's a possibility and a motivation to come out better and to continue the story that you're writing for yourself in such a way that a new perspective is found, a new piece of information is learned, a new value is added. And that's you know, when you're in the midst of chaos, it certainly doesn't feel that way. But you know, you want to work through it and get back on track. And so, like we were saying, you know, this is a kind of a look at all of the dynamics involved in mapping your life out, mapping the values of your story to yourself, if no one else, and to finding the best ways forward in the midst of anomalies of all kinds. And on that note, folks, thanks very much for listening. We appreciate your listening, and we hope that you hit subscribe and smash like, and we look forward to next week when we have another opportunity to share with you stuff that we're learning and thinking about.
All right. See you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everybody.